Joining me now is my panel, Brittany Packnett Cunningham, Black Lives Matter activist and an MSNBC contributor, and Kurt Bardella, former spokesman for the House Oversight Committee and an LA Times and USA Today contributor. I want to cover a lot of topics, but Kurt, let me start with, as an Asian American and a former Republican, you've been tweeting about this incident, and we hear about hate and terrorism all the time. Even the director of the FBI, Chris Wade, said yesterday that he considers Trump supporters who've attacked the Capitol on January 6th to be a form of domestic terrorism. And now, as we have the families and the communities of the victims in Georgia mourning their loss, how did we get here, and what can be done about it?
You know, Rev, we got here, in my opinion, in part because of the Republican Party. This is a party, and this is well before Donald Trump ever arrived on the scene. You can go back to what used to be their standard bearer, Ronald Reagan. Reagan, who, in my opinion, was a racist, who used policies such as the war on drugs, welfare demonization, the term welfare queens, pandering to the Christian right, to cater to the most extreme elements of the Republican Party base and cloaked racism in public policy. It's no coincidence that when you look at where the Republican Party is today, now the racists are the face of the party. What Donald Trump did was he gave license and permission to those group of people that Reagan and other Republicans pandered to for so long to come out into the open with their racism and their rhetoric. And it's manifested itself now into violence. It's no surprise that we've gone from extreme rhetoric to extreme acts of violence. They are linked, they are connected, and part of the solution is to start calling it out for what it is and to be aware and mindful of the context of how we got here. And it's been going on for a very long time.
Brittany, let me ask you this on another issue. The latest vaccination numbers are a little closer to reflecting the actual demographics in America. But Black and Latino communities are still underrepresented, given how the COVID has been disproportionately impacting us. Shouldn't we be aiming to be overrepresented in the vaccine data as it's distributed?
Well, of course we should, Rev, but unfortunately, medical apartheid hits all parts of the system. We know from the data that Black communities and Latinx communities were some of the very last to be tested, and the numbers were low at the very beginning of this process. That led to disproportionate treatment, or lack thereof, should I say, for those very same communities. The fatalities in our communities outweighed and outpaced the numbers in our communities, and we saw a disproportionate amount of deaths due to COVID and COVID-related things, again, in Black and Latinx communities. Now the vaccination numbers, unfortunately, are no different. We spent a lot of time in social conversations and medical conversations discussing the justified wariness that a lot of our communities have of medical systems, but we didn't actually remember that our communities are smart, and when given the information, the demand was there, and so they weren't prepared for that demand. We should be bringing this vaccine to the most in need and most vulnerable communities, and making sure that we prevent privileged folks from jumping the line so that the vaccinations go to the place where it's needed most.
Now, Kurt, we hear about stories of voter suppression all over the country. For example, Arizona has been voting by mail for 30 years, but now state Republicans are trying to dismantle their mail voting system. Arizona GOP has introduced at least 22 restrictive voting bills, and several major mail voting changes are progressing through the legislature. Now, as we pointed out on this show, this is a national trend that's also happening in Texas, Georgia, and Florida, with big implications in future presidential races. How do Democrats combat Republican weaponization of Trump's big election lie?
Well, I think it starts with passing H.R. 1. I think it starts with moving forward with the reforms that John Lewis spent his entire life fighting for and codifying them. And to do what we need to do, I mean, listen, we have control of the House, we have the majority in the Senate, we have the White House. As Democrats, if we aren't able to successfully use the instruments of government to protect and expand the fundamental right to vote, something at the very core of our democracy, then I don't know what the heck we're doing, honestly. I mean, it's very clear that Republicans have realized that when the playing field is level and all things are equal, they can't win. Their message doesn't work. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to pick their voters. They're the only political party in America who is built on the idea that it's better for them if there's less participation in our democratic process. They're the only political party in America that is making apologies and trying to whitewash the violent events of January 6th. We need to call it out for what it is. We need to use the instruments of power that we have. The voters gave Democrats the levers of power for a reason. They have to use them.
Now, staying on this topic, Republicans are willing to do anything to stop voting rights. Here's what Lindsey Graham had to say on Wednesday.
Here's what Biden needs to understand. If you go to the talking filibuster, we will take the floor to stop H.R. 1. I would talk till I fell over to make sure that we don't go to ballot harvesting and voting by mail without voter ID. I would talk till I fell over to make sure that the Equality Act doesn't become law, destroying the difference between a man and woman in our law.
Is this the new Republican brand, Brittany? I mean, will this devotion to obstruction at any cost move the last Democratic holdouts to reform the Jim Crow filibuster?
I mean, Rev, it's not the new Republican brand. It's the consistent Republican brand. I know we talk about what led to January 6th as the big lie, but the GOP has continued to lie over generations. And one of the consistent lies is about voter fraud and voter security. I'm here to tell you what you already know, that voter fraud is not real. The data bears that out. And bills about voter security, well, that's all based on a scam. Not only is our vote deeply secure, it is so secure that many people who should have access to their right to vote are not actually let through to do so. What is real in this case and in so many others is voter suppression. And the 250 plus bills that have been proposed in state houses all across this country, as well as the attempts of the federal level GOP to make sure that Black, brown, indigenous, poor, young, and LGBTQ folks can't get to the polls, is part and parcel with who this party is. They want to make sure, as Kurt already said, that more folks don't vote, because they know that if all of us who are eligible to vote do vote, they will never win another election in their lifetime. They want to prevent them losing their power. That's all this is, no matter how many lies they tell us.
Last question. 2 immigration bills passed the House this week with bipartisan support, but both face deeply uncertain futures in the Senate because far-right Republicans continue to insist any path to citizenship for any of the millions of undocumented immigrants living in this country amounts to amnesty. Kurt, amnesty has been a dirty word in the Republican circles for decades, even though their hero Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to nearly 3 million people. Isn't this language a way to avoid any compromise whatsoever on the immigration issue?
Republicans have shown for decades now that they have no desire, no interest, no will to take any meaningful action on immigration. They just see the issue of immigration as another frontier in their race wars that they have perpetrated on the rest of us. That's all that this is for them. The coded words, border security, national security, amnesty, those are code words for more racist policies that we've seen from them time and time again. It's ironic that the last time there was an amnesty in this country, it was from their so-called hero, Ronald Reagan. For all the times you hear Republicans quote Ronald Reagan, let's be very clear. Ronald Reagan could not get elected dog catcher in today's Republican Party. There's no place for someone like that in today's Republican Party. It just shows how fringe-worthy they are, how they cater to the bottom dwellers of their party in a craven attempt to hold on to power, because as Brittany just said, they know that if we all show up, they will lose, we will win. That is driving every single decision they are making right now, and that's why they're leading this race war on America.
All right, Brittany Packnett Cunningham and Kurt Bardella, thank you both for being with us. Up next.